Hello, everyone. Simon Das here, Director of 978 Group. We find, we finance, and we manage property for investors in the UK and internationally. So we have quite a broad oversight of the property, the real estate and finance markets. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Tim Farewell, who is a geospatial environmental data scientist, and he's currently Director of Science at the Dye and Durham UK Insights and Data, formerly Terra Firma.
That's right.
That's right, Dye and Durham UK Insights and Data. So today we're going to be talking about climate change and its impact on the property market, or how property, real estate investors and real estate financiers can adapt and try and head towards a green future. Well, that's certainly my intention for the conversation, Tim. Thanks a lot for coming today. It's really nice to see you again. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Really good. Thank you. Excited about this. I mean, it's an area that I'm really interested in, really passionate about, and it's an area that my science team have been really active in for the last year or three. So yeah, it's great to share it.
Awesome, awesome. So you've recently become Dye and Durham UK Insights and Data, and formerly Terra Firma. If you could just tell me and the people watching a little bit about the company, its purpose, its mission, and the products and services that you offer.
Yeah, it's a good story. There's so if we go back a couple of years, when I left the university environment and joined Terra Firma, there we were definitely on a mission to help people better understand the ground. So I came from a background of looking at soil, weather interactions with property and infrastructure. And I worked there for, golly, almost 2 decades, helping insurance companies and infrastructure companies understand these interactions between the natural world and the built environment. And my focus was always very strongly on soil there. But over time, came to realize that there were a lot of deeper geological risks that soil doesn't say too much about. So came to Terra Firma to build a ground hazard model that looks at soil risks, but also deeper geological risks. And then some of those mining hazards, which are often hidden, these holes in the ground, and build this a holistic model looking at all types of ground risks. Now, that model we then take to market a number of different ways. Terra Firma's main line of work was helping home buyers and their conveyancers understand these risks now and into the future. So the models fed into those types of reports, but increasingly we were providing it to banks, lenders, and insurance companies who are also really interested in these medium to long-term risks on property. So just to round that all up, Terra Firma was bought by Dye and Durham a number of months back, alongside a couple other companies, including Future Climate Info, Lawyer Checker. So what we're doing now is bringing all these areas of expertise together under the Dye and Durham brand. And we've got geoscientists, legal experts, conveyancers, really helping build a team where we can speak into all parts of this home buying, selling, financing process.
Amazing. Now, one thing that I picked up on previously, just to quantify this for some of the people who are in my network, one thing that you mentioned, one very real application of what you were doing, was that we're used to this archaic model of conveyancing in the UK when buying property, and we instruct the local environmental searches, and there's a mining search. And one thing you mentioned to me was an instance where you actually overcome a lender's unwillingness to provide a debt facility on a property because you had more specific data about that mining report. If you could just run me through that example just to quantify it for our viewers, that'd be helpful.
Sure. So I didn't handle that one personally, so I'll give you a second-hand account, because our mining experts really looked into that one. And yeah, you're right. It was flagged up as being at risk from a historic mine shaft. But what our data showed us was that actually, because of the remediation that had been carried out on that mine shaft in the past, the risk from that mine shaft, even though it was still underneath the house, it had been capped off properly. So it didn't actually pose much of any risk to the property. So once the lender had seen that level of information, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, actually we can lend on this. There isn't a risk that the house is going to disappear down a hole like it sometimes happens.
Yeah, so to me, it seems that you guys and other potential other private companies have a lot more data than the general conveyancing process looks into, and that data is massively valuable to the property industry in general. And I guess your mission is to get that data out there in a usable manner, affordably, but all in the while improving people's awareness around climate change and physical and the hazards of climate change. Is that
that's a pretty good summary, because we are keen that people do understand the ground and the risks that are present there. And so part of that is pulling together as much information as we can from a number of different sources. So if you look into our models, there's hundreds of different data sources coming together, and these include things like the work that Tom Backhouse did right at the start when he was setting up Terraform, of going around the mine surveys and local libraries and digging out old mine plans and digitizing those, and just trying to collate this very analog information and bring it into the digital world so that it can be useful and used by a range of organizations and people.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and climate change is really the next step of that. It's saying, well, these are the risks as they have been. How are they going to change? How is this property's risk profile going to change as we go into the future?
Which is incredibly vital for home buyers and lenders alike, which is where it really piques my interest. So, sorry to sound a bit ignorant here, but we see lots of climate models and different scenarios being presented. Do you think change is really going to happen? Climate change is really going to happen, and what will it look like?
So brilliant question, actually, because when you do look at the climate models, you'll see these 4 different pathways which spread out a bit like that, and some are, oh, that doesn't look too bad, and some look, oh, that's really horrible, that's catastrophic. And I think there's a couple things I would say to that. There will, already our climate is changing. We're already seeing increasing temperatures, increasing numbers of storms, very much hotter, drier summers. They're coming. The warmer, wetter winters are on their way as well. If you look at any one of these 4 UK CP18 scenarios, which are the best climate models for the UK, the direction of travel is consistent, but the rate of change is where there is that uncertainty. And a lot of that comes down to do with the kind of changes that we make as a society, individually. What are we doing to control our climate emissions ourselves and as in companies or as a country, and that if we all decarbonize our lives, maybe we will end up down at the lower end. So there's a number of different RCP scenarios. One is they range from 8.5, which is catastrophic, down to about 2, and at the lower end, still change happens. For the coming decades, we are going to be continuing down this path towards these more extreme weather events. It just won't be as bad as if we still keep flying around the world and eating meat 3 times a day.
Right. Okay. So it's a case of change is happening, and we have an opportunity to reduce how severe that impacts our lives ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we do have a chance to reduce those impacts, and we should do. but even if we get on board, rapidly, still change will happen. It just won't be as bad.
Okay. So what are the kinds of climate risks that you think the finance industry in the UK should be preparing for?
Okay, good question. In terms, let me answer that as it relates to property, because there's a number of, and probably just property in the UK. I think otherwise there'll be just so many that we can cover off.
Yeah.
So if we look at 4 key risks to property in the UK now, we've got subsidence, which is the most costly geohazard in the UK.
Right.
In terms of ground hazards. Then we have flooding, which is not a ground hazard, but probably even more costly than flooding. Landslides, coastal erosion, and these mines and voids as well, where they swallow up property. So if we look at just those types of hazards, subsidence, as I said, it is the most costly ground hazard at the moment, and it will become increasingly prevalent, because what we're seeing from our climate models is that new parts of the country are growing in subsidence risk. So we're going to have more and more properties in areas which historically weren't known to be at risk from ground movement, starting to crack in the summer and early autumn as the soils dry out and then re-wet, leading to kind of movement on that property. So that's one key change, that more and more properties will be at risk from cracking through subsidence. If we look at coastal erosion, it is already occurring. We've got some pretty interesting examples around the UK coastline of houses literally falling off the cliff into the sea, and that we've lost quite a large number of properties, and we're due to lose many more through increasing rates of coastal erosion. So that's another change. And flooding, that is a risk today, and particularly with the intensity of storms that are coming, will increase in risk in the future as well. But yeah, even the more minor risks like landslides, or the opening up of these holes over mines in the ground, these all are set to increase as we have these more extreme rainfall events, because with a landslide, you can think of it almost like a lubricant on the water on the slope. Almost all landslides have some water involved in them.
Right.
And you'll see the patterns that they tend to occur more in the wetter months of the year. So as our climate shifts to one with these intense rainfall events and wetter winters, so many of these ground hazards are just going to become more frequent.
Concerning.
Yeah, it is. It is. It is concerning. So much, when we look, we go, oh, well, surely it can't be as bad as that. Surely it can't be as bad as that. And then you start to see these things actually happening, and you kind of go, oh, maybe it could. So at least if we can look ahead, we can start to think, do we want to build houses in these places? Or what can we do to ensure that we are buying a property, particularly if you're a homeowner, like a normal person buying your home, it is your number one investment. This is where you're putting all your money. And I don't want to have people buying houses and spending all their money on something which won't be there in 30 years' time when they come to retire. That is sad, but it's a case of let's make people aware of the risks on that property so that they have a good long-term investment.
Yeah. So, your data that you're looking at is going to, the more broadly it gets utilized, it's going to actually change the shape of the way that people look at purchasing property. Ultimately, that sea view might become less desirable, because actually you're seeing more and more around the UK that coastal erosion is it speeding up at the moment? There's
definitely some evidence to suggest that. Particularly when you look at storm surges and some of my science team have been mapping coastal erosion. And maybe what we can do after this is send you some links to, to post alongside this of some of the maps that we've made. And you can just track how fast it's moving back, even to the point where you overlay on it the OpenStreetMap data and see these roads are still in the sea, that obviously they're not there, but the mapping hasn't been updated to, that's how fast it's happening.
Wow.
But the converse is true. My family and I went on holiday in the Northeast a summer or two back, and there are castles there which are built on the windsill, really solid bit of geology, and they've been there for hundreds and hundreds of years, right on the edge of the cliff, and they're still rock solid. So having an understanding of the geology, it's not that coastal erosion is happening fast everywhere, it's certainly not, but knowing those places which are at risk is an important step.
Great. So are there data sets and models that help show which properties are at risk now and are going to become more at risk in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the data set I was referring to earlier. We call it the National Ground Risk Model. And we've got, so it covers those 4 main hazards that we were speaking about: subsidence, landslip, coastal erosion, mines and voids, and some minor things in there as well. And we look at the risk to property now, and for each of the coming decades up to the 2080s to the 2100s, under each of those 4 different climate scenarios, from the kind of really good to really bad case scenarios. So lenders and insurers can, and it's particularly the lenders at this stage who are really interested in those longer term risks. But I was chatting with an insurance company, I think it was yesterday or the day before, and even they were going, actually, no, we do want to start looking at the changing risk for the coming decade, which is, I guess, for the insurance industry, pretty far ahead normally. But yeah, lenders are already using this data to identify those risks and go, is our portfolio, how resilient is it to these coming changes, and what are we exposing ourselves to?
Yeah, that's a really important point. If banks with hundreds of thousands of mortgages start plotting out where those properties are, and they might start noticing that they've got overexposure to certain climate hazards.
Yeah, that's right.
That might change the face of lending quite dramatically if people really get to grips with this data. And it's all out there, but it's a case of tapping into it and making sure that it's getting to the right people, I think, so that people have that understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess one of the key things is, despite us all being quite nerdy geoscientists and climate scientists, what we're keen to do with this model is not just provide people with the raw data, because we don't expect other people to understand geology, just like I don't understand finance as well as you do. So what we're trying to do is take these hundreds of different data sets, bring them all together, and then provide a pretty simple scoring system at the address level. So anyone can get access to the data for their back book analysis, and effectively being given a number of scores on a 0 to 10 or 0 to 100 scale, which says for these different risks, how concerned should they be?
Understood. So to bring it down to a scale that our viewers can all work on, what have you been doing as a company yourself, or even individually, to reduce your carbon footprint?
Okay. So for the last couple of years, when we were Terra Firma, one of the things which we were keen to do was to be carbon negative as a company, and that required a number of quite light touch interventions in the office, and perhaps more reliance on carbon offsetting and partnering with tree planting companies just to reduce those emissions, or at least offset them. So that was really good. I think we were one of the first companies in this space to be carbon negative. So that's good. And I think there's also a growing appreciation of the impact that individuals can make in the way that we live our lives. So I know some people have switched to electric vehicles. There's a couple people have done that, which is great. A number of us have radically reduced the amount of meat and dairy that we consume because of the carbon costs associated with that. And then simple things like, if we're meant to be these property experts, have we insulated our own properties? Are we using the most efficient heating systems possible? Excluding drafts. So it's a case of trying, we're certainly not perfect by any means, but what we're trying to do is go, that's a good idea. We can implement that in our company, in our lives, and push, in a small way towards a greener future.
I think it's really important that people understand that even these small changes are having an impact. And if everyone makes those small changes, then the impact is going to compound massively.
And actually those impacts, this could get quite contentious quite quickly, but if you look at very much the health benefits of a more plant-based diet, they're pretty significant. So I think I can't remember who it was, but there's this wonderful statement that typically if something's good for the planet, it's good for you too. I thought, wow, yeah, I wonder how true that is. And it's something to think about, isn't it? It's not all about the climate. Sometimes these interventions actually also save you money and make you healthier. So it's not all sacrifice, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I feel better.
I think that's really quite profound. And I can see how, our relationship with planet Earth, we're just another species on here and we all have to work in harmony. And I guess if it's good for the planet, then yeah, I can see exactly how that feeds back. That's quite enlightening, that, and I'm going to take that away. So thank you. A couple of questions to finish off about changing the world, or if you could change the world. If you could make one change in the property or finance industry to radically promote and steer toward a carbon neutral future, what might that be?
Okay. Okay, limiting it to one will be a challenge. So what I would love would be that any new houses which are built be carbon neutral or carbon negative. You look at some of the houses which were demoed at the recent COP summit. It's definitely possible to build houses in a very much more green way. So I'd love to see some legislation coming through from government, very strong legislation saying this is actually the direction of travel. And, let's say in the coming year, 10% of all new properties need to be built to this carbon negative standard. And then that increasing by 10% over the next decade, so yeah. In a decade's time, all new builds were effectively green built. That would be one thing. And in terms of the finance side, I'm not going to, do you know what? I'm not going to speak on the finance because I think I'll just expose myself as not knowing as much nearly, I'll put that back at you. Can I switch it back to you from the finance side? You're the finance guy.
Sure. Okay.
Is there something that you think the finance community should do to green the system? Is it around these climate risks? Is it about only funding green buildings? What do you think?
I think, it would be very easy to push a lot of onus onto consumers that are not at fault if there's too much of a drastic change. So if we were to only finance, green properties, people will end up in mortgage prisoner situations and all sorts. But I absolutely think there needs to be a radical shift. And I think that shift needs supporting by government. So a lot of new eco homes, there's less tried and tested building methods used, or different materials used. And these things pose a risk in the mind of a lender to the long-term security value of their security. So I think that the government should step in and start to guarantee or part guarantee mortgages on eco homes, on passive homes, on carbon neutral, on carbon negative properties, and really give an incentive to lenders rather than it being about them. Currently, lenders are offering reduced rates for higher EPC rating properties, which is more about them protecting their book, because these new measures will come in and suddenly EPC D and E may not be mortgageable, and you know, and so this is about, at the moment, the lending market is looking at it the wrong way, and they're sort of reacting, and it's not proactive. And I think we need to go out there and create products that are specifically for eco development. We need guarantees for mortgages for these passive houses and new creative methods of building that are going to be far more carbon neutral. And I think that needs supporting by government.
I really like that. So it's kind of like, you know, for people who are trying to buy an electric car, at the moment, the financing of that is a lot more, you know, doable than buying a traditional petrol car, because of the government subsidies, or it comes out before tax, or, you know, whatever. So you're saying something similar to that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it would really change the way people thought about it. At the moment, building eco and building green has so many hurdles in the way. You know, it can be difficult from a planning perspective because often these buildings look different. So aesthetically, you might face challenges in certain areas. You've got procurement of materials potentially that is more challenging due to the fact that it's just not standard practice. And then, you know, the finance involved, people are a bit less shaky. It's easier to say no to something than to try and find a way of getting comfortable. So we need that support from government to make sure that the lenders can go out there and back it, the developers can go out there and build it. And that's what we're missing right now.
Yeah, I was speaking with one of the larger home builders the other day, and you know, they were, how do I say it? Basically, they were looking for government leadership on this. They're saying, this is something we want to do. We want to green the way that we're building. But until the whole market, or until the whole, you know, sector moves in that direction, it's uneconomic. You know, we're not competitive if we're the only ones who are greening, which I find, you know, I can understand it. I find it deeply frustrating though. Like, come on, let's move us all in this direction. So yeah, even simple things like sorting out the foundation design. Really, if you look at deep trench fill foundations, you know, 40+% of the carbon emissions from the house come from pouring concrete into the ground. You know, you don't even see it. Foundations are super important, of course they are, but surely as an industry, if we were just going to choose one thing to do, let's sort out foundation design so we can come up with a very easy to install, low carbon foundation design. And, you know, you're cutting 40% of the carbon from the property. Sounds like a good first step.
Amazing. Yeah, hopefully one of our viewers has the ability to do something like that, and it spurs some deeper thinking on that, because I think that in itself could be transformative.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last one. If you could implement a new law to help the UK hit its environmental targets in the coming decades, what would that be?
So we've spoken about shifting the building industry. I think it would have to be around what we are subsidizing as a country. So make sure that all the the farming subsidies are ensuring that we're not, for example, how do I make this uncontentious? Let's not be paying farmers to grow crops or foods which are highly contributory to global emissions. So I think it would have to be in that space of let's direct those payments and those subsidies towards greening farming and greening the way that we live and eat.
Yeah, absolutely. We live just south of the Lake District, and whilst it's classed as this, well, it's an area of, well, it's a national park, isn't it? And it's incredibly beautiful, but ecologically, it's a desert. Some of the sheep farming in the area is heavily subsidised. It can't be run out of profit yet. Keeping sheep on this land is keeping it as a desert, and if we could flip that on its head and pay these farmers to be creating diverse landscapes, and I don't see why that couldn't be a problem, and give some of these people the same type of an income for working the land, but for working it in a different way and creating biodiversity. I think that could be really transformative, and it'd be amazing to see as well,
Yeah, and create a range of interesting new jobs, and but in the same time, preserving and enhancing the rural landscape, which I love. I absolutely love the outdoors, and I love people getting out into it and enjoying it. And again, it's this full cycle thing, isn't it? If it's good for the planet, it's probably good for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's lifting my spirit just thinking of the Lake District getting rewilded. So yeah, absolutely. Anything you want to finish off with, Tim?
Golly, first of all, I've enjoyed our chat, so thank you for it. I guess let's land it just in terms of, if people are, your viewers are typically in the property space. So just to say to them, if you do want to find out more about the reports that we provide on ground risks today and into the future, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I guess, Simon, you can put a link to my account there. Or also, if you are lending on properties and you want to look at the data that we have on these hazards, and to get hold of that and to look at that and test it out, then again, reach out to me and we'll set up a one-to-one call and talk you through it and see if it can help you.
Excellent. I'm sure there'll be some takers, and I'll share some links and point people in your direction. Really appreciate your time, Tim. Thank you very much.
Great. Oh, it's been great. Yeah, we should do it again, and we'll solve some more problems next time.
Excellent. Look forward to it. All the best.
Keep well. Bye.